All right, all right. We are live and cooking here. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Mark here with Marky Sportsman. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Wednesday and enjoying the decently warm weather here in Denver. That we're having now because I guess we're going to be hitting with some crazy nor'easter, freezing, sub-zero temperatures over the weekend. But we're cooking here, man. We're cooking hot with a lot of different uh, work being done right now on free agency, looking at this roster internally, and really taking a lot of, uh, you know, reading the tea leaves, I guess, so to speak, on the press conferences today from, owner Greg Penner, GM Greg Payton, and head coach Sean Payton. And I think that there was a lot there to cover that was pretty interesting overall. Not anything that's necessarily surprising, but there was two things that stood out to me, and it kind of ties right into this video, right? So I wanted to really talk about, and shout out to David from David Talks Broncos, man, for telling me about the Spot Track, $30 a year. It's an awesome, awesome service. I always use them, but I didn't even know they had a premium version of it. So we're going to go through that because that's a wonderful tool to use, no doubt about that. Gotta love it. But go through the roster, go through the cap situation, and talk about some needs that I think the Broncos have that are priorities. And in addition, I think needs that maybe we're not thinking about. I think that there's some needs that will eventually pop up because there's a couple things that were talked about in this presser today that were interesting to me. For example, one was DJ Jones, talking about DJ Jones. So let's get into this because we know DJ Jones got $10 million last year. I think a lot of people here in Broncos country, they just kind of assume that we are going to, re-sign a guy like him, right? Which is understandable. I think he deserves it. I'm a big fan of his. I thought he played super well this past offseason, especially in the run game, just being a very, very stout type of a defensive tackle. But it's also really interesting because you got to look at it like they had the opportunity to extend him last offseason, save us cap money going into this year, or they could have parted ways with him and saved us cap going into this year. They did none of the above. They kind of just said, let's let it ride out. And although I think his play was warranted to get an additional, contract from the Broncos, George Payton kind of went out of his way to say, we really, really love the Malcolm Roach signing. We love what he brings to the team. And he really harped a lot on Malcolm Roach. And it makes me think to myself, maybe, just maybe, with a lot of money being allocated to JFM and Zach Allen, they might be looking at DJ Jones as the next expendable piece in this puzzle. And I believe that really might be the case because you've got to think to yourself, you're either going to do something with John Franklin Myers this year, right, and bring down that $10 million cap hit that he has, or you're going to, do something with Zach Allen's contract, which you can do. So, I mean, you look at it here, right? You got 18 million and change due to Zach Allen against the cap this year, right? And then you've got, John Franklin Myers. I'm like all over the place here. You got John Franklin Myers at 10 million. Zach Allen's contract, you could easily extend, add maybe another guaranteed year, bring that money down. You don't mind, bringing that money down the road because of the kind of player that he's proven to be, the locker room guy, the fact that he's only 28. I think he has a lot of really good football left in him. When it comes to John Franklin Myers, he's somebody that I thought played really well. I thought it was a great trade. He's an awesome player opposite of Zach Allen. He got like 6 or 7 sacks this year. But he's going to be entering a contract year going into 2025, right? And even though we didn't give up a crazy amount for him in the draft, or draft pick wise, we need to look at being able to shore up those two guys, those two ends, right? And I don't think that there's an obvious replacement behind John Franklin Myers that you could just be like, boom, plug him in and play and roll with it. But because we got Malcolm Roach at the $4 million a year this year, he would still have technically one more year under contract. But I think what he showed, man, playing specifically his ability to play against the run, you can make an argument that when he was on the field, he might have even been more disruptive than somebody like DJ Jones. So I really just feel like, and if you just go watch it and you kind of watch the way that George Payton talked about it, I really do believe that they might have a little bit of interest in bringing back DJ Jones, but I don't think it'll be anything too crazy at all when it comes to that. And so, we'll go ahead and keep tabs on it. But if that's the case, I would be fine with Malcolm Roach being a starter, given what he showed, given the fact that he's obviously still has a lot more development and a much higher ceiling ahead of him. But that would really affect the depth behind him. So it would kind of, in a way, create another need that you can either address in free agency with some guys that we'll discuss, or you can address those things in free agency to an extent as well. But I think it's going to be more of the draft in terms of what you could do there, in terms of developing guys and all that good stuff. And then you can look internally at your roster. I mean, you got Iyoma Uzurike. He's more of a 5 technique. He's more of an outside guy, but he did play all positions on the defensive line in college. You've got Jordan Jackson, who I think is a good depth piece. You've got Matt Henningsen, who's kind of one of those guys that's you feel like is always going to be hanging around in the practice squad. He's just a really high work ethic, high motor type of a player. So you've got those kinds of guys, and you got a couple guys on practice squad too that project to be nose tackles. Can't think of their names. I can think of their face, but we can pull it up. But I think you're going to have to look externally for some guys that maybe have a little bit more experience overall. So love to know what you guys think overall when it comes to that. But here's the interesting thing. I think when you look at the roster and we break down the cap space, a lot of things point out. Now, Mike McGlinchey with the $23.7 million, that's a big cap number. The reason for that is because last year he did a restructure on his deal that brought his cap number down. It saved us about 11 or 12 million bucks, but it added money on the back end. So that's why the cap number is higher this year. Could we do that again? Sure. Do I think the Broncos have any interest in doing it? I don't. They have an opt-out clause after this year with him that they could potentially move on from Mike McGlinchey. Not saying that they should. I think Mike McGlinchey played a lot better this year than he did last year. But at some point, you're going to have to, have the next guy come in and fill in. And I think with really promising developmental guys like Alex Polcheski, who I thought was awesome in the games that he filled in for McGlinchey this year, and also in Frank Crum, seeing what he can become, you've got to start thinking about those types of things as well. And I think going into next year, both of them will be phenomenal depth pieces for us. But at some point, you got to say, hey, we're spending too much money on the O-line. We're going to have to start allocating those dollars elsewhere. It's fluid year by year. So I don't think they would touch that too much. However, Cortland's number at 20.2, I certainly expect for that number to be brought down via an extension, right? He's going into a contract year again. He hit all of his incentives. But I can see the Broncos doing something along the lines of, let's see if I can, I don't know why it's not allowing me to pull up. Oh, I got to click on the calculator. Sorry, let me just figure this all out real quick. Contracts. Boom. So when you look at somebody like maybe not, hold on, Cap, here it is. When you look at somebody like a Cortland Sutton, what I can see happening here with Court is being able to get him onto maybe a 2-year extension or an entirely new deal at 3 years. I think the 3 years for him, bringing him into the year 34 season, would be really smart of us. That's kind of when you start to see players, and I can really see it. Go ahead and customize the extension. I can see it being, so if we're talking extension, I can see that being an additional 2 years, no void years. Actually, maybe we would do a void year here. And then in terms of new value, it would probably be a 2-year deal worth about $25 to $30 million, right? So I'm gonna put $30 million here, but it's difficult to talk about in general because if you're going to do an extension, you're going to take into account that they have $20 million in this year's salary. And then on top of it, so essentially it's going to be a 3-year, $50 million deal. So the extension could really be like 2 years, $20 million, 2 years, $25 million. You make this year of $20 million, and then, the following year with an average of 15 guaranteed. So you have about 35 guaranteed overall in there. And then you can make the signing bonus somewhere in the, $10 million range and be able to manipulate it. And what that would do is it would move his cap number down from 20 million to 9.3. It would save an additional, almost $11 million in cap this year. Lock him up. He's happy. Everybody's good to go. You can build around it, but you're not in a contract with him that's going to be, super detrimental to the team. You're really financially committed to him for the 2025 and 2026 season. And I think at Broncos country, we could all we can all be good with that. And in addition to that, that really gives us a lot of it's going to give us a lot of cap flexibility moving forward when it comes to guys like looking like if you wanted to go after a big name free agent like a T. Higgins or somebody that I'm super high on free agency wise, and Chris Godwin, you can still allocate some dollars to that position, to some veterans, be able to tackle it that way, or obviously look at different positional groups as well. Now, when you talk about other guys on the roster that you can certainly free up a lot of money, I know one guy that is gonna make a lot of sense is going to be Alex Singleton. Would I like to see him back because I love the dude? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't see it happening, or he's going to be having to come at a significant discount, similar to kind of what we did with Tim Patrick last year. But Tim Patrick had about $7 million in dead cap that we owed him anyways. So we basically signed him to a deal that was like, it's going to be the vet minimum on top of the guaranteed $7 million that you get if you make the team. So we ended up just parting ways with them, and it really didn't affect the team much. So I can see that happening similarly with Alex Singleton. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and put release. That's going to free us up about $5.5 million. Now with just those two moves, you're talking about $71 million and change in cap hit, right? And I think, like I said, I think you could do something with the John Franklin Myers as somebody that you want to extend. You could bring that number down. I think you can certainly do something with Brandon Jones because he's going to be entering his final year of the deal as well. And technically, he got 2 years, $19 million left after this year. But you can extend him because you feel like at 27 years old, what he showed, he can be a really good player for several more years. So maybe you can add another year on the back end, give him some more guaranteed cash down the road, convert some of that salary and bring that number down to 3 or 4 million too. You can do that. And you'll definitely do that with Will Lutz because you're not going to have Will Lutz take $5.5 million on cap space this year. He's a kicker. He's still got several good years left in him. So, you got to make the decision. Are you going to keep him? I think the answer is obviously yes. You can extend him and get that $5 million cap number down too. So there's a lot of different ways that you can really affect it and make it a good thing. I mean, even with a simple conversion, you can save $2 million there. With a simple conversion here, you could save yourself another, it looks like $5 million against the cap. And now you're close to $80 million. You're hovering around $77 million. There's a lot that you can do there. So looking at the roster, that's kind of where I'm at. Now, when you break it down and you go and you start looking at the free agency, I showed this file here the other day when I was live with the fellas. We were talking about this. So let me go ahead and pop this up. So we got some of the free agents you'll be able to see. Here. Are you guys able to see that? Let me make sure. I think it looks all funky. Oh, it's because I'm sharing my whole screen. Well, it's because I'm stupid. All right. We'll go ahead and just do it like this then. So the Broncos free agency list is here. We talked about this in length. Really, guys, there's not anybody on here that I would be heartbroken if we lost. Even DJ Jones, just thinking about with Malcolm Roach and what he can become and some of the defensive line free agents and also some guys in the draft that I think are really good that we'll talk about on a different show. I really do feel like even though he was a good stalwart, it doesn't make sense. You have to always look at it from a roster management perspective. Where are you allocating a lot of your dollars? Right now, it's a lot of our cap is going to be spent on the offensive line, rightfully so, as it should be, and on the defensive line. But we might have to start moving that to be able to fill in much bigger needs. And even though DJ Jones, I thought was really, really good, he is getting a little bit older in age. He's a little bit undersized for a nose tackle. And he's somebody that I feel like is kind of on the descent rather than the ascent. And so when you really think about those kinds of things, you don't want to create a whole new hole, but you've got a replacement directly with a guy like Malcolm Roach. I really do believe that it's not going to affect the defense too much, especially if you shore up what's going on behind those guys on the linebacker position. So I really wouldn't care. I would say if I choose between any of these free agents, I would still probably choose, DJ Jones over all of them, but I would not be heartbroken to see anybody gone, or maybe a Cody Barton, just because you kind of know what you're getting in him. And depending on which one of the free agency candidates you'd like to go after, there's a lot that can happen there. And so, Cody Barton has shown that he's He's damn good against the run, but he's not very good in coverage. So if you get yourself a linebacker that is an elite cover guy, maybe you can pair him up with somebody like a Cody Barton, who seems like he's really well liked and good there. And then Justin Strnad, if he's going to, being a depth linebacker piece, I think he's a fine depth linebacker piece. I really like what he could do on special teams, kind of building out the back end. But otherwise, none of these guys really, tickle my fancy, I guess. I'd say probably, honestly, now that I think about it, Zach Wilson is somebody that I would like to see here, because I feel like having a really good backup quarterback, somebody like him, is a good thing. And I think, that quarterback room had a lot of really big time positives there. So that being said, I would say, still, if you're asking me, what is the Broncos' biggest need? The biggest need for this team is tight end. Now, this is a positional group that I thoroughly, with all of me, believe that we will address in free agency and in the draft. We will get a free agent player. What's up, my man D-Rock? And we will get, we will draft a tight end 100%. I can almost guarantee that's what's going to end up happening. A second big need, assuming that DJ Jones is gone, would still make linebacker the second biggest need on this team. Bigger than wide receiver, and I would say even bigger than running back. And the reason I place it as bigger than running back is because I feel like it's more difficult to find very good, productive inside linebackers, whether it's in free agency or in the draft. Guys that come in the draft, you can find them. They're not always necessarily ready to go right away at that position. At running back, you can typically find those guys. You can churn them out. You can do it in free agency, which is a really bad class, but this is an amazing running back class for running back. So I'm all about addressing that position in the draft for sure. So number one, biggest need, tight end. Number two, inside linebacker. Number three is going to be running back in terms of where we can find these guys, right? It's not the biggest need on our team in terms of like production rooms, but in terms of what I think we should prioritize heading into this offseason. And then four, I would put inside, IDL, inside defensive lineman, assuming that DJ Jones is gone, which I do believe that he will be. I think we're going to let him walk in free agency. And then also wide receiver. Wide receiver is big, but wide receiver is interesting because I think we're looking for a very specific type of wide receiver. Because of what the guys in the current roster can do, but also you don't want to hinder the development of a lot of these young guys still. You want to see what they can do. It's going to be a process in that room. But that's why getting a lot better at running the football and getting a much more effective tight end room is naturally just going to help the current wide receivers that we have as well. So that's why I placed those, those biggest needs at four after kind of reevaluating everything. Now, what I wanted to do and what I wanted to focus on in this particular session with you all is going through the linebacking core specifically, because the free agency class for inside linebackers is fascinating. It really is. And I'm going to go under the assumption that we are going to move on from all of our current linebackers that we have, right? Alex Singleton, I think he's somebody that we're going to cut. Cody Barton, not a priority re-sign, but maybe at the right rate. And then when you're looking at somebody like Justin Strnad, we already know there too. So first and foremost, my guy, the guy that I want the most, without a question about it, I would say probably more than anybody in free agency, because this actually makes sense. And I just love everything about this player, always have. And that is Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw is somebody that, he plays for the 49ers, and the 49ers are notorious, regardless of who the defensive coordinator is, they are notorious for finding gems that can play linebacker. This guy has been one of the leaders on the team. Everything that you read about him, when you dig into him, you hear his players talk about him. He is one of the locker room leaders. He is an alpha in the locker room. He's somebody that is just, there's no other way to say it. He's a baller. And I think from a fit standpoint, in terms of the culture that you're trying to build, he's somebody that fits right in. Love it. 5th round pick, and he's infamous because he's the guy that tore his Achilles running off the sidelines in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs a couple years ago. And it was devastating for the team. You can just tell that's an awful injury. He came back this season and he still wasn't even fully himself, according to a lot of people that covered the team and a lot of things that you read, things that PFF had talked about as well. But he still had a really, really good year, especially in run defense. He's always been one of the elite run defenders, but before this year, he was one of the highest graded for the last 2 seasons in 2022 and in 2023 when it comes to his ability to cover, which is huge. So he's an amazing cover linebacker. And look at this, guys. Crazy thing is here in 2023, when he rated as a 79.5 in coverage, he had 635 snaps just cover snaps, and 616 the year before in 2022. So he's brought in on a defense, and his role in the defense in San Francisco has been to cover as much as he possibly could. So you got to love that. Got to love that. He had an injury-plagued season in 2024, but that's a positive thing. Injury-plagued, I think, like I said, obviously he didn't play much coming from the torn Achilles the year before in the Super Bowl, so that happened so late. So he really only played 2 games this last season in San Francisco. That could bode really well for a team like the Broncos, because you're going to get a player that's now a full year removed from tearing his Achilles, and that's also going to be able to help you a lot in negotiations when it comes to a contract. You're not gonna have to fork out big dollars necessarily, potentially, for a guy like Dre Greenlaw. And he's only 27 years old. He'll be 28 when the season begins. So, and he doesn't have a ton of wear and tear on his body, considering. So give me Dre Greenlaw all day. I think he would fit super well. He's somebody that's extremely well-rounded. If you need him to cover, he can do it. You need him to stop the run, he can go ahead and do it. So I'm a big fan of Dre Greenlaw. Another guy that I wanted to point out, and maybe somebody that's going to be on the lower end of cost when it comes to the Broncos overall, is going to be Tyrel Dotson. This is probably a name that not a lot of you guys know. And I didn't know much about him either until I started doing a lot of digging and work over the last few days when it comes to the linebacking position. But there's a lot to love with Tyrel Dotson, and there's a couple red flags, right? So what there is to love is he is a bona fide stud when it comes to covering. He is your premier cover linebacker. He's basically like a safety that you can put in the box that plays linebacker position. He's very, very good in coverage. He does, however, struggle a little bit when it comes to run defense. He had a really good 2023 with Buffalo, but the other 4 years that he played, he was never really highly graded as a run defender. He is a little bit undersized, but look how elite he is when it comes to his ability to cover. To give you guys an idea, he played for 2 teams last year. He had a career year, a huge breakout year, and with Buffalo. Then he goes to Seattle, plays super well for them, and they get rid of him. And he goes to Miami, and he gets 3 picks in 4 games when he's in Miami, if I remember that correctly. Yeah, 3 interceptions in 5 games when he was with Miami. So somebody that is an elite cover guy. Here's a couple red flags that you have with him, right? Aside from the fact that he could be a liability in the run game. And that is something that I feel like coaches can make players improve upon. Is, first of all, he was suspended his rookie season for domestic violence as an undrafted kid. So the off-the-field things you don't love. Now, that aside, obviously guys deserve second chances. By all accounts, he's been kind of staying out of trouble for the last few years. So that's why, you don't see anything for the 2019 there. But why is it that even though by all accounts he played well, and not just based off of PFF, based off of, what a lot of the film shows and what people that are familiar with Seattle talk about, they say he played really well in Seattle, but then they just out of the blue cut him, and he ends up signing with Miami and actually plays really well with Miami too. But why is that? There's always those questions that you have to answer. Is it a locker room thing? Is he just not a part of, is it a work ethic thing? What is it? There could be a lot of different reasons for it. I'm not gonna sit there and speculate, but it's super important for us to talk about, because we know, especially based off of the press conferences that we heard today, we know just how important that is for Sean Payton and George Payton and bringing in the guys with the right makeup. But he's somebody that was extremely intriguing to me. Another guy is Jamie Sherwood. This is somebody that actually PFF said would be a quote-unquote perfect fit for the Broncos. Didn't really know much about him until I started looking into it a little bit. But he seems somebody that projects from a player standpoint to be very similar to Tyrel Dotson. He's extremely good in coverage. he's shown to be a liability, although not as much of a liability as you would think in run defense. He's actually graded out pretty well as a run defender, all 4 years. But the reason that I think he could be is because he's only 6'2", 216 pounds. He really is like a safety playing linebacker. But I think it's interesting to point this out. You started noticing that towards the end of the year, once we started to get exposed a little bit on defense, because teams were attacking our linebackers in the pass game, whether it be with a tight end or with a running back. They were trying to find those matchups and attacking it all day. Vance Joseph did a really good job of adjusting, but he would adjust by taking a linebacker off the field and putting in a guy like a JL Skinner or a Devon Key. So he would insert another safety. So this would be somebody that you could put in, but he's got a lot of linebacking experience. And even though he's undersized, he's shown he can be pretty good in the run overall. And my goodness, can this man cover? He certainly can. So somebody to really watch out for, intriguing player. And what's even more intriguing about him is it doesn't show it on here for some reason, but I'm pretty sure he's just going to be 25 years old. Let me double check that for you real quick. But he's a young player. Yeah, he just turned 25, so he'll be entering next season at 25 years old. That's huge. That's huge. Super young player, under the radar, played for the Jets, and as bad as the Jets are, we know it's terrible. You get a Robert Saleh coached defense, you're going to have a good defense. He knows how to pick linebackers. He knows how to coach up linebackers. So he's going to be somebody that's going to come in. And I mean, in 465 run defense snaps, he had a pretty solid grade overall at 77.1 this year. And then in 558 coverage snaps, he covered very well also. So undersized guy that's actually really good in run defense, but it's shown that it could be a cover. There's a couple other options, but those are the ones that I really wanted to focus on. And I think to myself, it makes a ton of sense, because when I look at it, like, let me see what my man D-Rock's saying right here. He said, sorry if you already covered it, but any free agent tight ends that you would like to see in Mile High Country? I didn't cover it. I was going to save that for like a dedicated episode, but there's not really too much from a free agency standpoint. That's going to be more of a draft. But Juwan Johnson's the guy that makes the most amount of sense, that really sticks out to me. So I just feel like it's almost a lock for us to get Juwan, given his ties with Sean Payton. Sean Payton obviously knows a lot about him. So if he doesn't go after him, it's got to be a makeup thing more than anything, because I think he could be a really good addition here. But when you look at these linebackers, there's a lot more. We went through 3, but when you look at linebackers as a whole, there's quite a bit that are available, off-ball guys that I think can be really great additions for the Broncos. There's a lot in the draft as well. So very similar to tight ends, how I think tight ends going to be addressed in free agency and in the draft. I think you could see us doing the same thing with inside linebacker. Lavelle Bailey is someone that I think is really important to keep tabs on because they liked him a lot. He showed a lot of promise in the preseason. He's obviously very young, needed to develop, but an entire year being between the 53 and obviously on practice squad, I think is really helpful for somebody like him. This offseason is going to be huge for him too, and I think he'll be given a really good opportunity as well. But I do see us addressing that position on both. It's interesting because you've got a mix of guys. You've got a Dre Greenlaw who's extremely well-rounded in terms of linebackers, which is why I would love to see somebody like him come in. He should be the priority free agent, in my opinion. But then you got a guy like Tyrell Dotson, who is elite when it comes to cover, but a liability in the run game. And then you've got, Jamien Sherwood, who's really, really good against the run, even though he's undersized, and shows some potential as a cover linebacker, but still not necessarily, all that impressive there. But there's a lot of room for growth with a young guy. So it's a really good mix. I mean, hell, you bring in Jamien Sherwood, you sign Dre Greenlaw, we'll be short up at that position, no doubt about it. And what's nice is that one of them in Dre Greenlaw is probably going to cost a little bit more. The other guys, I don't think are going to command a really big free agency contract. So it's a win-win across the board. And that is one thing that, George Paton and Sean Payton have shown, is that these guys can not only draft like specifically in those middle rounds, but they can find a lot of really good value in free agency. Alex Smith over here says, what about bringing Javonte back in a limited role? I love Javonte Williams. I really do. it broke my heart when I saw the injury, and I gained so much respect for him when he came back, the way he came back, how fast he came back. But absolutely not. There's no reason to bring Javonte back in a limited role. We had him in a limited role this year. He didn't really do anything from a run game standpoint. I think what he does really well, he's a good third down back. He's very good at pass pro, but I think all that really does is it muddies the running back room as a whole. Sean Payton is not going to want to go with 3 running backs at all this year. And Javonte Williams' inability to pose a threat as a runner is a big tell for teams. They're just going to be like, cool, they might be passing the ball. If they run, we're not scared about it. So it kind of affects the versatility in the different offensive package that you have. So although I can dig the question and I can super understand it, I just wouldn't do it at all. Me personally, I think it's just time for an entire revamp of that room. Bring in some guys that really fit the mold of what it is that Sean Payton and this team want to do. The run game is the most important, even though I don't have it as the biggest need, it's the most important room to improve. I would say even probably aside from tight end. Tight end's still probably going to be the biggest because of the next level that a solid run game can take you and take this offense overall. So, but yeah, certainly appreciate the questions, man. If you guys have any other questions or anything, please put them in the comments. I'm going to wrap up here shortly, but I do want to say appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're not a subscriber already, it'll really help me out if you could hit that subscribe button and check out there's some wonderful community on YouTube of some independent dudes that just do this a few hours a week. Some of them do it full time, some of them not as much, that are really knowledgeable, that are really smart, that can give some unique insight on this team that you won't really find on the main platforms. And some of it's because some radio stations and TV networks are trying to push an agenda. Others, there's just so much to talk about that they don't always necessarily get to it. But shout out to David from David Talks Broncos. He's got a great channel. Strez has a wonderful channel. His Twitter handle is @its_Strez, STREZ. Check him out. I featured him on the channel here. He's awesome. Kodiak Broncos is doing some great things as well, man. So shout out to Kodiak. And I love building this thing out. So definitely check those channels out if you haven't already. Subscribe to them. If you're not a subscriber already, man, show them some love for sure. But let me know what you guys would like to see. I'm going to be doing a video every single day. Similar to this, I'll probably be going live. I'm going to focus tomorrow on a different positional group, and we'll kind of go through the roster that way. We'll talk about the current state. We'll talk about some free agents, and then really going to turn our attention over to the draft as well. So looking forward to that, man. Very, very much so. But otherwise, I appreciate y'all, man. D-Rock, Alex Smith, all you guys that are watching right now. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, go Broncos, baby, and peace out.